These are the most notorious pirates ever. Let's dive right in and see who truly owned the golden age of piracy.
Let's start with the lesser known pirates and slowly work our way towards the most notorious ones on the list. Number 7. Captain Kidd. William Kidd, better known as Captain Kidd, is perhaps the goofiest pirate of all time. Kidd was a privateer, which means he was a legal pirate hired by the government to hunt and invade enemy ships. He worked for England and the American colonies and was active from 1695 to 1698. In 1696, Kidd and his crew passed a Navy yacht and failed to salute them, which was required by naval protocol. The Navy yacht fired a cannonball near Kidd's ship as a warning that they must show respect and salute them. But instead, Kidd turned around and smacked his cheeks repeatedly in their direction. Now, as funny as he thought he would not be laughing for very long, as the Navy vessel's captain retaliated by drafting the majority of his crew into the naval service. Kidd would go through multiple crews in the coming years and was well known for being a harsh captain, like when one of his crew members insisted that they invade a passing ship, to which he refused, calling his crew member a lousy dog. His crew member quickly clapped back with, "If I'm a lousy dog, it is because you made me one." Kidd responded by dropping a steel bucket on his head, cracking his skull and killing him.
Man, that escalated quickly. I love his storytelling. But it's crazy that countries basically hired pirates back then. The Kidd wasn't just robbing ships. He was doing it on a government contract, like a corporate pirate with paperwork, and killing a crewmate over an argument. That's less Captain Kidd, more HR Nightmare with a sword.
Captain Kidd's biggest accomplishment was the capture of the Quedagh Merchant, an Indian ship that was carrying expensive fabrics, gold, and silver. But there was a problem. The ship was not an enemy ship, and had even paid England for safe passage. This incident would mark the beginning of the end for Captain Kidd, as he was labeled a pirate and became a wanted man. He was captured on July 6, 1699, and was later sentenced to hang for piracy and murder. Captain William Kidd was hanged on May 23, 1701. But hold on. As his body dropped, the rope snapped. With his body hitting the floor, he was knocked into a daze. Onlookers, shocked by what had just happened, began to surround him and called for his release, as the rope snapping was seen as a sign from God. He was quickly retied, hung, then gibbeted.
That's honestly hilarious. The man literally respawned mid-execution. The rope snaps, the crowd's losing it, people are crying, "It's a sign from God," and the guards just shrug and go, "All right, take two." It's such perfect 1700s chaos. Faith, superstition, and bad rope technology. Imagine dying twice before lunch because physics wasn't on your side.
Number 6. Black Bart. Bartholomew Roberts, better known as Black Bart, was a Welsh pirate and one of, if not the most successful pirates of all time. In his short pirating career spanning from 1719 to 1722, he managed to capture over 400 ships in the water spanning from the Americas to the West African coast. Black Bart captured ships mainly through intimidation tactics, since he typically had 200 to 400 men with him. They raided ships and gave the sailors the choice of either giving up everything on board or giving up their lives and everything on board. Black Bart is also known for popularizing the skull and bones flag, which he flew on his flagship, the Royal Fortune. He raised it just moments before raiding a ship, striking paralyzing fear into anyone unlucky enough to see it. Now, having a ton of men and resources was not the only reason Black Bart was so successful. He was well known for being a very strict leader and even created his own set of rules, known as the Pirate Code. For example, his Pirate Code stated anyone caught stealing from another crew member or deserting the ship during a battle would be punished by marooning. This meant that they would be left alone on a deserted island to figure it out. Most didn't. But after 3 years of pirating, on February 10th, 1722, Black Bart's luck finally ran out. While out at sea, they were spotted by a British warship, and a battle ensued. Shortly after the battle began, Bart was fatally wounded by a shot that struck his throat. As his lifeless body lay on the deck, his crew wrapped him up in a sail, weighed him down, and tossed him overboard, keeping their end of the promise. Bart had stated many times that when he inevitably died, his final resting place was to be the sea. His body was never found. As far as the men on board, those who survived were taken back to England and charged for piracy.
He actually sounded kind of epic, like the CEO of piracy. Had structured discipline, even a pirate code before corporate ethics were a thing. Most pirates were drunk chaos with cannons, but Bart ran his ship like a startup with swords. 400 ships in 3 years? Dude basically invented hostile takeovers, just with more cannonballs.
Number 5. The Gentleman Pirate. Stede Bonnet, better known as the Gentleman Pirate, has one of the most unusual stories as far as pirates go. Born into a wealthy English family on the island of Barbados, while most men turn to piracy for a slim chance of gaining wealth, Bonnet embarked on his pirate journey in search of adventure. Now, most pirates acquired their ships by seizing them, but not Bonnet. He had the money to have one custom built, naming it the Revenge. Bonnet then assembled a crew of 70 men, heavily relying on them to navigate the seas, since he had zero experience or knowledge. This, as you can imagine, resulted in his men having little to no respect for him. Typically, pirates were paid by splitting the loot they acquired from seized ships, but not Bonnet's crew. He paid his crew wages out of his own pocket, buying their friendship. Now, I know this all seems very funny and seems like the guy just bought his way into playing pirate, but I promise this is where things begin to get interesting. Bonnet and his crew quickly found success along the eastern seaboard, capturing at least 8 ships. And just as he was warming up, he ran into a Spanish man of war. Outgunned, he lost half his men and was heavily injured. Fleeing the fight, he ended up in the Bahamas. There, he met and teamed up with one of the most infamous pirates of all time. But for now, we'll keep his identity a secret. Together, they seized at least 11 ships before going their separate ways. Seeing how the new leader operated, half of Bonnet's crew abandoned him, choosing to join the new crew instead. Now, in a surprising turn of events, under King George's Act of Grace, any pirate could be pardoned of their crimes on the condition that they give up piracy forever. Bonnet accepted the offer, but had no intentions of actually stopping. He simply changed his name and the name of his ship, as if no one would ever notice. A few months later, he was captured and brought to Charleston, South Carolina to face charges for piracy. But Bonnet had other plans. He ended up escaping, just to be recaptured, hung, and gibbeted. Bonnet's body was later buried in the marsh below the waterline in an unmarked location. To this day, his exact resting place remains a complete mystery.
It's crazy. He was more like the trust fund kid of piracy. He didn't steal a ship, he ordered one custom built like a midlife crisis with sails, paying his crew wages instead of sharing loot. That's not piracy, that's an awkward internship program, and thinking a name change would fool everyone? Man really thought rebranding fixes everything.
Number 4. Charles Vane. Charles Vane is perhaps the most ruthless and violent pirate to have ever lived. Where other pirates are known for their successful raids, Charles Vane is known for being an absolute menace, as he routinely beat, tortured, and interrogated sailors whom he captured. Much of Charles Vane's life is shrouded in mystery, but what is known is that he rose to power and achieved the rank of captain in the Bahamas around 1717. Later that same year, Vane was captured by a British Royal Navy officer, but was released when he claimed he was accepting King George's pardon and giving up piracy forever. With a clean slate, Vane didn't waste time destroying it and began raiding and capturing ships around the Bahamas, turning pirate once again. As he had captured many sailors during this time period, and in an attempt to gain information, he would viciously torture them by beating, cutting, burning, and eventually hanging them. On one occasion, Vane sailed to Charleston, South Carolina and stole a ship that was full of slaves, which must have been a great sigh of relief for the slaves, seeing that they were leaving the South, just to find out that the ship had been taken by Charles Vane. On November 23, 1718, while out at sea, Vane and his crew spotted a large ship. Naturally, they raised the Jolly Roger flag to intimidate the ship into surrendering. They were instantly blasted with heavy fire as the ship raised the French naval flag, and in a panic, Vane quickly ordered the crew to retreat. Once they were safe, the crew turned on Vane, saying that retreat was the move of a coward. He was kicked off the ship with only a few of his men following him. For the next few months, Vane continued with his ruthless ways, capturing and looting ships as well as torturing and killing sailors. But in February 1719, Vane was caught in a violent storm that left him and a few of his men shipwrecked on a deserted island. They would remain on that island for a little over a month, scavenging for food and barely surviving. When out of the blue, by some miracle, a ship arrived on the island to refill their water supply. Surprised and overjoyed, the men rushed the ship to beg for help. But it didn't work. Vane was quickly recognized by one of the men on board and arrested. He was taken to Jamaica, found guilty of piracy, and was hanged and gibbeted.
Hanged and gibbeted seems to have been the go-to finale back then, like the 1700s version of canceled, then trending posthumously. Fun fact, gibbeting meant your body was hung in an iron cage and left to rot in public as a warning to others. Basically, history's most gruesome billboard campaign.
Number 3. Long Ben. No pirate has left behind a greater mystery than Henry Every, better known as Long Ben. Henry Every went by many names: Long Ben, the Arch Pirate, and the King of Pirates. But I'll just refer to him as Every here. Every was an English pirate who operated in the Atlantic and Indian Oceans in the mid-1690s. And in just 2 years, Every would manage to leave behind one of the most iconic legacies in pirate history. Unlike many pirates, Every first attempted to live a respectable life, joining the Royal Navy, then working on a ship for the slave trade. During this time period, he acquired the skills he would need to become one of the wealthiest pirates to ever live. While working for a Spanish expedition, the crew of men failed to receive payment for their services, so they simply took the ship, and Every was elected captain. Needing money to support their families, they turned to piracy. And for the next couple of months, Every and his crew seized many ships, which included 3 English merchant ships, 2 Danish ships, and a French pirate ship. But on September 7th, 1695, Every and his crew managed to pull off the most lucrative and bloodiest raid in pirate history. This happened when he joined forces with 5 pirate captains and their crews, amassing a combined crew of over 440 men. The men would then come together and vote Every as the leader of the newly formed group. The target was the Ganji Sawai, one of the largest trading ships at the time, which belonged to the Mughal Empire. As soon as they spotted the ship, Every gave the command to attack. Boarding the ship, hand-to-hand combat broke out. The bloody and gruesome fight would last for several hours, with many casualties on both sides. But eventually, Every and his men would be the last ones standing. They escaped with anywhere from 200 to 600,000 pounds and around 500,000 gold and silver pieces, a value of around 115 million pounds or approximately $143 million today.
Absolute props to him. That's generational pirate wealth right there. But it's wild seeing how much inflation hits. A few 100,000 pounds back then turns into over 100 million today. Dude basically robbed an empire and retired richer than most modern CEOs. Talk about early financial freedom with cannons.
The men quickly split the money amongst themselves, with Every receiving a larger portion. As soon as news broke of the attack, the English and Indian government placed a large bounty on Every's capture, leading to the first worldwide manhunt in history. But here's where things get even more interesting. After the men split the loot, they all agreed to go their separate ways to avoid capture. Every told his men conflicting stories about where he planned to go to spend the rest of his life and enjoy his newfound wealth. After the split, inevitably, some of the men were captured and interrogated by authorities and gave up Every's final location. But each time authorities arrived to arrest him, Every was nowhere to be found. And for the next decade, rumors and whispers spread of people claiming to have seen him in many countries around the world. Yet, every time authorities arrived, Captain Henry Every was never there.
That's so clever. See, he knew his crew would eventually get captured and tortured, so he gave each one a different story about where he was headed. That's 4D chess level paranoia. Every basically outsmarted the first global manhunt, vanishing like a myth with a bank account. It's almost poetic, the pirate who mastered both plunder and disappearing acts.
Number 2. Ned Lowe. There's only one pirate that was so violent and sadistic that once you hear how he treated prisoners, it will make your stomach turn. Edward Lowe, better known as Ned Lowe, was one of the most feared pirates in history, and for good reason. You see, when pirates become notorious, it's usually due to their deeds and the treasures they amassed throughout their careers. But not here. Edward Lowe was very different. But before I cover what made him notorious, let's start at the top. Edward Lowe was an English pirate who was active towards the end of the golden age of piracy during the early 18th century. Lowe's life of crime began in childhood, pickpocketing, gambling, and stealing whatever he could get his little hands on. Eventually, he got sick of pickpocketing and thievery as a way to make a living, so he turned to burglary. A few years later, around 1714, he moved to Boston, Massachusetts as a young man. He got married, had a daughter, but sadly, things took a turn when his wife died during childbirth. Lowe attempted to make an honest living working on a ship that transported logs. But one day, everything changed when Lowe's temper got the best of him. While out at sea, he asked the captain for food, only to be told that all he had for him to eat was rum. Lowe, furious with the response, picked up a loaded musket and fired it at the captain, killing an innocent crewman that was standing right next to him. Lowe and around 12 other men were quickly forced off the vessel. The following day, the men led by Lowe took over a small ship, killing an innocent man on board. With a ship in their possession, they began their new lives as pirates. Lowe and his crew headed to the waters of the Cayman Islands. There, they joined the crew of a well-established pirate, George Lawther. But after a few months and many successful raids, Lowe was made captain and given his own ship, which he called Rebecca. This is when Lowe garnered his gruesome reputation and became one of the most feared pirates to ever live. Lowe created many torture methods that he would use on anyone he captured at sea. But I'll just cover some of his favorites and some notable acts. On one occasion, Lowe captured a French cook, saying that he was a greasy fellow who would fry well, then setting him on fire. Then there was the famous incident where he captured a captain, cut his lips off, cooked them, and made the man eat his own lips while they were still hot.
Man, that's just insane. What the actual fuck? Edward Lowe wasn't just a pirate. I mean, he was a psychopath with a ship. The man turned cruelty into performance art. Setting a cook on fire because he looked greasy? That's straight horror movie logic. Making a captain eat his own lips? That's beyond dark humor. That's psychological warfare. It's like he sailed the seas just to invent new ways to traumatize humanity.
He would also routinely tie sailors' hands with a rope, wrap it between the fingers, then set it ablaze, burning the person's flesh down to the bone. Then who can forget the time he killed 53 Spanish captives in a single day with his sword? But wait, there's more. There were also countless times where he would simply raid a vessel, tie the men up, take the loot, then set the ship on fire, burning everyone on board alive. Or the countless incidents where he would raid ships, take all their loot and food, then send them on their way to starve to death. But not only was he a complete bloodthirsty maniac, he was also a notorious cheater, approaching ships and hoisting friendly flags, tricking unsuspecting vessels into letting their guard down before attacking. But after 3 years of carnage and capturing and burning hundreds of vessels, in July 1723, Lowe sailed into the open sea and was never seen again. Some believe he died in a storm out at sea. Others say he was left to die on an island by his own crew. Then, of course, there's the theory that he sailed to Brazil and lived the rest of his life under a new identity. Number 1. Blackbeard. I mean, who else could it have possibly been? Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, is easily the most famous, feared, and notorious pirate of all time. You can see his influence in modern films, TV shows, and video games today. And for good reason. Teach was an English pirate who operated around the West Indies and the eastern coast of North America from 1716 to 1718. Not much is known about his upbringing, and it wouldn't be until Edward Teach became Blackbeard that the world would really know his story.
Yes, actually everybody knows him. Blackbeard's basically the poster boy of piracy. Fun fact, before battle, he'd tuck lit fuses under his hat and in his beard, so smoke would swirl around his face like some demonic final boss. It wasn't just intimidation. It was early psychological warfare with a dash of theater.
Blackbeard was a tall man, standing around 6'5", with a long, thick black beard that he braided. He wore a long black coat, a wide-brimmed hat, and a bandolier across his chest, holding multiple handguns and daggers. Now, if that wasn't scary enough, the madman would also place slow-burning fuses in his hat, beard, and hair, lighting them right before invading ships, which was such a terrifying sight for sailors that they typically surrendered without a fight. The first account of Blackbeard came in the spring of 1716, when he emerged as a captain with a large crew of around 70 men. That spring, they traveled up and down America's east coast, capturing and ransacking 8 merchant ships. It was around this time that Blackbeard met and teamed up with Stede Bonnet, the gentleman pirate, which we covered in the number 6 spot. Now, what really made Blackbeard famous was his capture of the La Concorde, a large French ship that was carrying around 500 slaves. After taking control of the ship, he released the crewmen and slaves on the island of Bequia, only for them to be recaptured a few days later. With a new powerful ship, he renamed it Queen Anne's Revenge and equipped it with 40 guns. They then went on one of the most brutal looting sprees, traveling through the Caribbean Sea to Mexico, then up the east coast of the US, ransacking every ship they came across. This included a large merchant ship called Great Allen that secured him a spot in the Boston Newsletter, further growing his popularity and fearsome reputation. By this point, Blackbeard had already become one of the most famous pirates alive. But his biggest and boldest move came on May 17th, 1718, when he stationed 4 ships outside of Charleston, South Carolina, just far enough at sea where they could not be seen from shore. There, they waited to ambush ships that were entering or leaving the port, and for the next 5 to 6 days, they captured and ransacked 9 vessels. This included a ship that was carrying Charleston citizens, whom he held for ransom but eventually traded for a chest of medicine. And this is when Blackbeard and Stede Bonnet would go their separate ways. Bonnet would end up hanged shortly after, while Blackbeard traveled up north to North Carolina and accepted the king's pardon, agreeing to give up piracy forever. He made North Carolina his home and settled down, marrying his 14th wife. Now, of course, the story couldn't end there. You see, the entire time Blackbeard continued his life as a pirate, with many suspecting that the town's governor simply turned a blind eye to it, as it brought economic benefits to the town. But eventually, the governor of Virginia had had enough and sent the Royal Navy to capture Blackbeard. And in the early morning of November 22nd, 1718, the ambush meant to capture Blackbeard escalated into a full-blown battle. The pirates were outnumbered 3-1, and the gruesome battle would last for around an hour. Blackbeard and his crew fought bravely to their last breath, but inevitably lost the battle. When it was all said and done, Blackbeard lay dead with 25 stab wounds and 5 gunshots. His head was cut off, then hung on the Navy's ship, with his body tossed into the ocean. Blackbeard's head would then be hung on a pole at the entrance of the Hampton River in Virginia, where it hung as a warning to pirates for several years. Blackbeard's terror lasted only a little over a year, but in that short time, he managed to seize over 40 ships, leaving behind one of the most terrifying and notorious pirate legacies in all of history.
Blackbeard's story feels like the perfect pirate myth. A man who burned bright, terrified nations, then vanished into legend. In barely a year, he turned chaos into fame, fear into immortality. His beard smoked, his enemies trembled, and his legacy still echoes through every skull flag and sea shanty today. Good Enough absolutely nailed this one. The storytelling, the pacing, the atmosphere, pure gold. Links in the description, definitely check it out. And let's just say, the next video might take things in a direction you won't see coming. Stay nerdy.